Nietzsche's warning: goodness suffers in a corrupt world. What if the pain you feel as a good person in this world isn't a flaw, but a sign that you're awake in a place that rewards sleep? That's the terrifying insight Nietzsche handed to us, like a blade wrapped in fire. He didn't whisper it gently. He screamed it across the centuries, through books that still burn with unsettling truths. And one of the most painful truths he left us with is this: goodness, real and uncompromising, will always suffer in a world shaped by corruption. Not because goodness is weak, but because it refuses to play by the same dirty rules. If you've ever felt like your kindness gets punished, your honesty gets trampled, your integrity isolates you, then this video is for you. Because Nietzsche saw you coming, and he had something to say. We live in a system that praises virtue in speeches, but rewards vice in silence. Look closely. The world calls for kindness, but worships power. It tells you to be honest, yet glorifies those who lie more effectively. You're taught that humility is noble, but it's arrogance that fills the headlines. This contradiction isn't accidental. It's foundational. Nietzsche didn't believe in fairy tales about human nature. He believed in raw, unfiltered truth, and what he saw was this: most people don't want goodness. They want comfort. And real goodness, the kind that stands against lies, exploitation, and shallow praise, is profoundly uncomfortable. It destabilizes the herd. It questions the game. And for that reason, it becomes the target.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
But let's slow down. What did Nietzsche actually mean by goodness? Because he didn't mean the shallow politeness we call goodness today. He wasn't talking about smiling in public, donating to charity, or being nice in conversations. No, he meant a deeper, more dangerous kind of goodness. The kind that comes from inner strength. From a soul that refuses to lie, even when the truth costs everything. The kind that challenges systems, that speaks even when silence is safer. And here's the paradox: the stronger your moral compass, the more hostile the world can become. Not because you're wrong, but because you're interrupting a lie everyone has agreed to live inside. Nietzsche didn't hate goodness. He hated the way society manipulates it. He warned us, beware of systems that reward obedience and call it virtue. Beware of values that are designed not to elevate, but to pacify. He believed that much of what we call good was actually a form of control, a weapon used by the weak to shame the strong. But that's where people get him wrong, because Nietzsche's goal wasn't to kill goodness. It was to resurrect it, purify it, make it fearless again. Not the goodness of sheep, but the goodness of lions. And this is where it hits hard. Because if you've ever tried to live with fierce integrity, you've probably felt that quiet isolation. That strange sense that you're out of sync with the world. That you see through things others accept. That you care too deeply in a place that rewards numbness. That's not insanity. That's awareness. Nietzsche's warning is this: if you choose to be truly good, you are choosing a life of tension. You are choosing to suffer for the sake of something higher. And that suffering doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're resisting the break. Ask yourself, why do people lie, manipulate, cheat, flatter? It's because the corrupt world often functions like a machine. It demands conformity, not authenticity. It rewards surface over substance. And it trains people without ever saying it aloud to be efficient cogs. They could get ahead, not by rising, but by playing the game better than others. Now imagine being someone who refuses to play. Someone who walks into a corrupt system and says, "No, I won't do it your way." That person is not celebrated. They are crushed, mocked, isolated, and yet they are the only ones truly free. Nietzsche believed the greatest strength wasn't physical or intellectual, it was moral courage. Being the courage to be misunderstood, the courage to suffer without losing your soul, the courage to look at a corrupt world and still choose to live by your own code. That kind of goodness is not soft. It's dangerous because it exposes the cracks in the system. It reminds everyone else of what they gave up to survive. And people don't like to be reminded. So they fight you. They slander you. They isolate you. But here's the key: they cannot destroy you. Because what they're attacking is not a strategy, but a way of being, a truth, a fire. So now I ask you, what kind of goodness do you carry? Is it the kind that pleases the world, or the kind that breaks it open? Do you want to be liked, or do you want to be real? Because you might not be able to be both. Nietzsche forces us to confront this. In a corrupt world, real goodness is always a form of rebellion. And rebellion always comes with suffering. But maybe that's not the problem. Maybe the suffering is the proof that you're still alive, still human in a system built to make you forget. The loneliness of integrity, why the strongest souls walk alone. There's a quiet kind of suffering that doesn't come from failure or loss. It comes from choosing to live with integrity in a world that has normalized betrayal. It's the kind of suffering that doesn't scream, doesn't complain, but sits heavily on your chest at night when you know you did the right thing and were punished for it. Nietzsche didn't flinch in acknowledging this brutal reality. In fact, he leaned into it. He told us directly, if you are committed to truth, to honor, to real moral strength, prepare to walk alone, not forever, but for long, brutal stretches of your life. Because the path of integrity cuts away from the crowd. It doesn't win through applause. It moves through shadows, through self-doubt, through wilderness. And very few follow it willingly. We often imagine strength as something that appears outwardly shouted, flaunted, displayed in defiance. But Nietzsche was far more precise. He saw strength not in domination, but in restraint. Not in conformity, but in the decision to remain oneself despite everything. The person of true integrity doesn't wear masks to blend in, doesn't barter values for comfort, doesn't adjust truth for the sake of peace. And because of that, they are often seen as dangerous, arrogant, even antisocial. But look deeper, and you'll see something sacred, or a fire that refuses to go out, a will that cannot be bought. And most terrifying of all to those who are compromised, a conscience that doesn't blink. What Nietzsche feared more than evil was the silent decay of the good. He saw that most people don't become wicked through malice, they become wicked through compromise, and through convenience, through 1,000 small betrayals of what they once knew was right. And slowly they forget what they gave up. But when someone walks into their world and refuses to play along, refuses to laugh at the same lies, or cheer for the same fake victories, it's like a mirror shattering their illusion. That person, the one who holds the line, becomes the outcast. Not because they're wrong, but because they remind everyone else of what they lost to be accepted. And so, the person of integrity begins to experience a deeper kind of isolation. It's not the loneliness of physical solitude, it's the loneliness of moral clarity. It's the weight of seeing too much, feeling too deeply, refusing to numb yourself. And that awareness doesn't make you popular. It makes you dangerous. Because a person who doesn't need approval can't be controlled. A person who speaks the truth, not to provoke, but because silence would be a betrayal, that person destabilizes the world around them. And the world retaliates. Not with argument, but with distance, with rejection, with silence. Have you ever felt it? That strange quiet that follows when you tell the truth in a room full of comfortable lies? That sense of being alien, not because you're cruel, but because you won't pretend. Nietzsche warned that if you are one of the few who choose to remain awake, you must accept that the herd may leave you behind. And in that moment, you have a choice: dilute yourself to be welcomed back, or endure the silence and stay true. Nietzsche didn't offer comfort. He offered confrontation. He believed that those who carry real integrity are forged in solitude. That their strength doesn't come from approval, it comes from surviving the absence of it. And over time, something changes. That isolation becomes transformation. That silence becomes depth. You start to notice things others miss. You begin to hear your own thoughts more clearly. You learn how to hold space for your values without needing anyone to validate them. And in that space, you begin to become dangerous not to others, but to the systems built on illusion. Because here's the deeper secret: integrity is not just moral. It's existential. It's not just about doing the right thing, it's about being in alignment with reality, with yourself, with life as it is, not as you wish it to be. And once you begin to live this way, something paradoxical happens. You do walk alone, yes, but that aloneness becomes freedom. The crowd no longer binds you. The rules no longer imprison you. You are no longer seduced by fake rewards. You don't need to fit in because you've become whole on your own. Nietzsche knew that the greatest thinkers, the most courageous spirits, the real revolutionaries always endured a period of exile, full of silence, of being labeled insane, difficult, extreme. But he also knew that this was the price of becoming real. Because once you pass through that fire, no one can take from you what you've earned. Not fame, not wealth, not even companionship can compare to the clarity of knowing you didn't betray yourself. So let me ask you something hard. Are you willing to walk alone, if it means walking in truth? Can you endure the exile of being real, rather than enjoy the comfort of being fake? Because this world is full of illusions, and every day it invites you to trade your soul for acceptance. Nietzsche says don't, because the world may never celebrate you for your integrity, but it will never be able to own you either. The noble rebel, how suffering becomes strength in Nietzsche's vision. There's a strange beauty in Nietzsche's vision of suffering, not as something to avoid, but as something to endure, embrace, and even become. To him, suffering wasn't a detour on the road to greatness, it was the road. Not the meaningless kind of suffering that comes from apathy or chaos, but the necessary kind, the kind that refines, reveals, and rebirths the noble rebel, Nietzsche believed that anyone who dares to stand against a corrupt world will bleed for it. But in that bleeding, something sacred is born, something unshakable, a power that does not depend on applause, validation, or comfort. The one who suffers rightly suffers into strength. We are conditioned to believe that suffering means something has gone wrong, that if we're in pain, we've failed. But Nietzsche turned that belief on its head. He saw suffering not as a punishment, but as a crucible, as the great clarifier. When you suffer for your values, for your refusal to kneel to lies, for your commitment to speak even when it costs you everything, you are no longer just a person. You become a creator, a rebel, a warrior of spirit. And while the world may never recognize your strength, you will feel it in your bones, in the silence that doesn't crush you anymore, or in the scars that don't shame you, but crown you. Think about the life of any great soul who chose to live with radical honesty. They were rarely rewarded immediately. Most were cast out, mocked, silenced, even destroyed. Socrates was sentenced to death for asking dangerous questions. Jesus was crucified not for breaking laws, but for breaking illusions. Dostoevsky was imprisoned for thinking too freely. Nietzsche himself died alone, half mad, his words unread in his time. Yet, all of them carried the same essence, a refusal to lie. A commitment to truth that cost them everything and gave them more than anything else ever could. And that's the irony. Suffering doesn't weaken the noble rebel. It initiates them. It burns away the unnecessary. It strips them of their need to be liked, to be understood, to be safe. And in its place, it leaves behind something fierce: vision, depth, courage. The ability to see the world clearly and still choose to love it not sentimentally, but fiercely, through action, through presence, through the refusal to surrender their soul to convenience. Nietzsche's greatest insight wasn't that life is hard. We all know that. His insight was that if you engage with suffering properly, not as a victim, but as an artist, it becomes the raw material of transformation. You shape your pain into meaning, into wisdom, into a voice that can't be silenced. And in doing so, you create something that the corrupt world cannot replicate: authenticity, realness, power that no one gave you, and therefore no one can take away. So ask yourself, are you using your suffering as a justification to hide or as fuel to rise? Are you letting the pain of the world deform you or refine you? Because Nietzsche believed this, suffering is inevitable, but what you do with it determines who you become. Do you collapse into resentment, or do you rise with clarity, with strength, with fire in your chest that says, "I will not play dead for a dying world"? That's the noble rebel. The one who walks through fire and comes out not bitter, but awake. Who suffers, not to gain sympathy, but to gain truth. Who understands that to live with integrity in a corrupt world is to be at war, but it is a holy war. A war fought not with weapons, but with will, with clarity, with the refusal to be anything but real. And maybe that's the final paradox Nietzsche leaves us with. You suffer not because you're weak, but because you're too strong to pretend. Because your soul still resists the lie. And that resistance is not your curse, it is your crown. The final defiance, why remaining good is the ultimate act of power. There is a moment, quiet but shattering, when a person who has suffered deeply for their goodness is tempted to let it go, to give in, to close their heart, to say, "Enough, I will become what the world wants because this pain is too much." That moment is the razor's edge, and Nietzsche knew it. He knew the world would tempt the good person, not with evil, but with exhaustion. Not by defeating them, but by making them tired of caring, tired of standing alone, tired of being the one voice in a room full of silence. And yet, that's where Nietzsche places the final challenge. Can you remain good, not because the world rewards it, but precisely because it doesn't? In a corrupt world, Nietzsche saw that true goodness is not about naive purity or moral obedience, it is about will. The will to remain inwardly sovereign. The will to carry truth, like a secret torch, through corridors of darkness. And what makes this will so rare, so feared, is that it cannot be purchased or manipulated. The truly good person, in Nietzsche's world, is untouchable. Not because they are perfect, but because they have chosen never to trade their soul for safety. Their kindness is sharp. Their compassion is aware. Their love is earned through fire. And that, more than anything, is power. What Nietzsche teaches us at the end is this: goodness that survives corruption is not soft, it is defiant. It is an act of rebellion. It is the refusal to let the filth of the world bury the beauty still pulsing in your bones. Because when you choose to remain kind in a cruel system, when you choose to speak truth where lies thrive, when you offer grace where bitterness is the norm, you are not losing. You are rising. You are doing what empires and tyrants fear most, staying human. This is why Nietzsche often pointed not to saints or martyrs, but to the Übermensch, not a tyrant, not a monster, but a higher human, forged by suffering but not broken by it. A human who has walked through fire and chosen, not revenge, but clarity. Not apathy, but artistry. The one who turns their pain into poetry, their rejection into resilience. That's what the corrupt world cannot understand. That even when it beats down the good, it accidentally sharpens them. That goodness, real goodness, does not beg for mercy. It becomes mercy. It radiates a quiet strength that doesn't need to explain itself. It simply exists, and its existence is a revolution. So here is the final question Nietzsche throws into your soul. Will you let the world change you? Or will you become the kind of person who changes the world just by refusing to collapse? Because the world will always try to convince you that your goodness is weakness, that your empathy is a liability, that your refusal to lie is foolish. But Nietzsche's warning remains: these are not flaws. They are proof that you are awake, that you still remember something sacred the world has forgotten. And while you may suffer for it, you do not suffer in vain. You suffer because you're strong. You suffer because you still care. And in that suffering, you carry forward the greatest power any human can possess: the ability to remain good in a world that begs you to become less. That above all is what Nietzsche wanted you to see: that the final act of power is not domination. It is preservation, preserving your soul, your truth, your light, even when everything around you tells you to put it down. And when you do that, you don't just survive the world, you transcend it.